These are not all of the Dunwoody police officers that I've interacted with throughout the years. I've interacted with many, many more than this. These are just the more senior ones. The other uniformed officers that I've interacted with, even as recent as probably in the last 6 months, have been great. There is 2 female Dunwoody police officers that are absolutely phenomenal. There is, I don't want to go down the whole list, but I would actually like to take an opportunity right now in this video to actually say this to the other uniformed officers that are not at the sergeant or above. A lot of this for you guys is something where you had no idea that there was an inner circle in your police department. Whatever you even think you know about the people that you would recognize on this slide here, for the current uniformed Dunwoody police officers, you most likely don't even barely know anything about Robert, Pennsylvania, unless you were there for that long. You definitely know Anthony Stallings. He's moved over to another agency. The last 4, actually Caleb Gilbert's obviously not there. You may know him, not know him. But the last 3, Tim Fecht, Andrew Fondas, Tim Waldron, they're still there. So the first 3 are no longer there for different reasons. The last 3 are there. Whatever you think you know about these people is only what you're supposed to know. Whatever you think you see about their characters or anything about their conduct, whatever, this is only what you're supposed to see, and this is only what you're supposed to know. So, by any means, I'm not trying to put a total umbrella over every single Dunwoody cop. That's not fair and that's not true. There's some of them that are there that are absolutely ethical to the bone. They are in integrity to the bone. They just don't know their leaders as well as they think they do. So let's continue. First column, Robert, Pennsylvania. Ironically enough, the guy who is giving data from law enforcement databases to known people who have known connections with criminals, sat down in his office, met the guy, talked to the guy briefly. Let me read it instead of giving commentary. Read it. Ronen invited into Dunwoody Police office by Detective Robert, Pennsylvania at that time to discuss ways in how to catch the recent perpetrators breaking into the clubhouse at Ronen's luxury apartment building. In the beginning of their inception, they were in a different office than they are right now, Dunwoody Police, right nearby my apartment complex. At that time, I was living in Access at Perimeter, and there were some break-ins at our, community clubhouse, whatever you want to call it, pool table, whatever. Even then, I was the type of person that is involved with stopping crime. I got annoyed when people were breaking into our community clubhouse at my apartment complex. So, I gave a call to this guy and I said, hey, I think I know how they're doing it. Let me give you some ins on how to catch them. I think at that time it was something like, have you checked Craigslist, because whatever they're stealing from our clubhouse, I think they're trying to flip it on Craigslist. So keep an eye on that. I think I might have even found some links. So I was invited to the office, sat down with Pennsylvania at that time. And even then, that early on, it was the good old boy network, obviously. Like people walking by the office, I don't want to get into it. It's not even that relevant, but it was relevant to just kind of point out that that's as far back as I had interaction with these officers. So it's not like they don't know me. At the irony there is that even Billy Grogan passed by Robert, Pennsylvania's office while I was in there. He would have never recognized me. I recognized him, though. So let's continue to the next one. Being Detective Anthony Stallings. He wasn't a detective for the whole time. He switched, I think, from detective back to sergeant. I don't know. I think now, when I looked him up, I think he's now a captain somewhere. I think possibly Powder Springs, Georgia Police Department. Good for him. Have nothing bad to say about him. Nothing. Even the notes that he took at the time of the original investigation. The original investigation, let me, remind people back again his relevance, just to get his interactions. He was the first detective that was assigned to my mother when my mother was first getting harassed and cyberstalked by Zello gang cyberstalkers who were mad that I was more popular than them and were mad that me and the woman that I was living with from Zello, that we were in a live-in relationship. We kind of became the power couple, but people hated us for it and got jealous and only knew my name, so attacked me, not her. So then it spilt over to my mother's Dunwoody house, even though we weren't living in Dunwoody, and Anthony Stallings was the one who was first assigned to the original case that went nowhere because of my own apprehension. I'll admit it, that was my fault at that time. It doesn't excuse the fact that there were other people later on in the Dunwoody Police that completely just flipped it around because of arrogance and their own pre-existing corruption that I had no clue about. But Anthony Stallings was decent. I have nothing bad to say about the guy. Ronen, no longer living in Dunwoody, is cyberstalked by unstable users from a live chat app called Zello. Assailants make bizarre efforts to attack Ronen. Definitely bizarre. By attacking his mother's house in Dunwoody. So the notes he wrote on the case were excellent. Then we get over to Detective Caleb Gilbert. Like I put over there, 2016, 2017. I don't remember the exact time of when the re-escalations took place with more attacks targeting my mother's Dunwoody home. And this is where things went bad. Because Detective Caleb Gilbert's demeanor was entirely different than Detective Anthony Stallings' demeanor. Now, mind you, this Detective Caleb Gilbert that I have here, that I did also sit down with, is the same guy that put the cameras in the apartment to film people having sex. And was able to leave before anything was able to be investigated on him, having done so unlawfully. So I wrote here in this particular section for him, continued harassment campaigns led by even more unstable Zello cyberstalkers forming a gang, which we'll cover in future videos. They did on Zello. They formed an online RICO-style cyber-stalking gang. Leads to more threats and targeting of Ronen's mother's house in Dunwoody. So this is when I finally said, I should have came down and met with Anthony Stallings. I didn't realize it was going to continue. I'm definitely going to Dunwoody Police now with my mother, sitting down in a room, explaining everything, showing more evidence. And Detective Gilbert at that time was like, with all due respect, you're not a resident of Dunwoody, so I'm going to defer back to your mom. And I'm like, what do you mean you're going to defer back to my mother? The only reason that she's getting attacked is because she's having her Dunwoody house in your jurisdiction taken hostage and hijacked by these psychos who only just are doing it to get clout on the app, on Zello, because she happens to be related to me. They hate me, so they're attacking her. So this all entirely has to do with me. What are you talking about? I'm the one with all the evidence. I'm the one on Zello recording conversations of these people making threats to harm and attack my mother's Dunwoody home. So how do you figure that I'm not involved in this? Like, what are you talking about? Didn't want to hear it. The reason that this is important to mention Caleb Gilbert at that time is because of whatever bullshit twisting of narrative, backdoor criticisms were written in the case notes that only Dunwoody Police would be able to see. Watch them now that, as I say, this is potentially try to go and delete stuff. I already know they've already gone to delete tons and tons of evidence where they talked mad trash about me to multiple places and multiple entities. They probably gone and deleted a lot of it to conceal that they were acting under the color of law thereafter, under a complete bias and with no impartiality, personal vendetta based. So I'm sure they deleted a lot of stuff. But going back to what I was saying, without going off too much on a tangent, whatever he wrote in the case notes, Caleb Gilbert, about somehow twisting it and flipping it around, doing the Uno reverse card on me and making it look like it's my fault for my mother getting targeted, for my mother's house getting cyber stalked and harassed. It's my fault because I won't leave Zello. It goes back again to the original analogy that I said. What if this was a bar? And this kind of does go off on a tangent, because this shows how incompetent and arrogant some local law enforcement is to dismiss criminal harassment and stalking happening online versus happening at a bar or in physical reality within their jurisdiction. Okay, the point that I'm making here is, with that bar analogy, is if I were going to a bar where everyone hung out and there's a group that doesn't like me, and they then go to my mother's house and stalk her physically because we all live in the same town, you don't tell me to not go to the bar anymore. Don't tell me not to show up at the bar where I'm more popular than these creeps at the corner who decide that the best mode of revenge of me rejecting them, not wanting to be their friend, winning arguments with them in front of a wider audience. Don't tell me that I shouldn't go to the bar anymore so that my mother's house will stop getting harassed. Go after the assailants and do your job. No, they know better. They know better. Their common sense is far more superior than my common sense, apparently. So whatever he wrote there set the stage for their brewing dislike for me that would have just continued to grow into an uncontrollable avalanche that led into the existing frame job operation. Then we get into good old Sergeant Tim Fecht. Good old Sergeant Fecht, Tim Fecht. Captain America Tim Fecht, who acts like he can do absolutely no wrong. Always well-intended. Allegedly. 2019, when a serious issue that took place, leading me back to Dunwoody, not by my choice, but because of the unstable situation that took place with my ex-partner at that time from Zello, leading to a restraining order. I continued to get, isn't that ironic? I was the one being given a restraining order and for a reason that I'm going to explain in future videos, but I don't want to overwhelm people with too much data right now. But yeah, the entire live-in relationship was completely a nightmare decision of mine for the trajectory of my life, because I'm not going to get into it in this video. I'm going to just read the section that I set for Tim Fecht. Is Ronen is forced to temporarily relocate to his estranged mother's home in Dunwoody, the same house that's been getting gang harassed and gang stalked, after being served with an ill-conceived restraining order by the deceptive live-in girlfriend that I met from Zello. Deceptive how? We'll get to that later, because this is much bigger than this person's deception that I was in a live-in relationship with. It got way worse and more dangerous than just who she is to the story. But what did Tim Fecht do at that time? How did Tim Fecht even get involved? Well, after I was given this ill-conceived restraining order and had to basically be forced out of my house. At that time, it was Roswell, Georgia. It was not Alpharetta anymore. We moved from Alpharetta to Roswell. And based on certain things that took place that I discovered about my then ex-partner, she felt that the best way to silence me is to call me, a woman abuser and all this other stuff, only when I found out what she did. Before I found out what she did, she never went to the police. She was making more money than me. She could have kicked me out any time. She could have called the police anytime. Conveniently, only when I found something out that she was doing to have me harmed, that's when she suddenly became an abuse victim. How convenient. But it completely shattered the stability of my life at that point, where because I was still sustaining more attacks to my finances by Zello gang cyber stalkers trying to get me fired from anything that they literally wanted me to make they wanted me to make no money. They wanted me to be completely fired so that then they can be on Zello saying, ha, Ronen, look, you don't make any money. You don't make any money, loser. Well, you guys keep attacking my ability to make money, so whose fault is that? But anyway, again, I don't want to completely digress. The reason Tim Feck got involved at that time is because immediately when I moved back to my mother's house, and when I say moving back, it's not like I really grew up there to begin with. I left the house at age 17. The family life was very, very dysfunctional. I started my adult life at 17 years old, so it's not like I was living at mommy's house for, extended periods of time. 17 years old, I was already fending for myself. So to come back to a parent's house after already having been out, independent, 17 years old, coming back at that time I was 41, from 17 years old to 41. At 41 years old, and you have to come back to your estranged mother's house. It's already weird and extremely uncomfortable given the circumstances that led to it. But it was also even weirder because I was moving to the very house that was continuously getting gang stalked and harassed by the people on Zello. So now that they found out through this ill-conceived restraining order that was given to me by the ex-partner, they found out that basically I moved back to Dunwoody. They're like, wait a second, this whole time that he wasn't living in Dunwoody, we were cyber stalking and harassing his mother's house in Dunwoody to basically take her address hostage. But now you're telling us that Ronen moved to the address himself. Now he's there alongside with his mother. Like, they had a field day. There were additional threats made to me by my ex-partner's own friends on Zello, brandishing Glock pistols, money, saying that they'll pay anyone to come to Dunwoody to harm me, all sorts of stuff. You name it, I recorded it. They constantly did Freedom of Information Act requests from Fulton County, as well as DeKalb County, whatever, to constantly pry into my life. They literally made me this like celebrity, but in a weird way where like they wanted to know everything about my life to attack. But if I were to go to the police, guess what they would do thereafter? They would then bum rush the police, Dunwoody Police. They would contact through phone calls and emails and say, no, Ronen's the villain here. Ronen's the boogeyman in the situation. As if I have the resources and time to go against like 10, 12, 15, 20 people. So good old Tim Feck at that time was in a position to be the one who assigns caseloads to detectives. Well, Tim Feck read whatever was written by Caleb Gilbert. I'm getting ahead of myself right now. That's going to be in the next slide. But you're kind of able to tell now where this is going. Essentially, Tim Feck read whatever he read and appointed himself as the decision maker of whether anything should be investigated at all. And in 2019, the evidence was much harsher. It was terroristic threats. It was one of my ex-partner's friends in New York conveying terroristic threats, communicating terroristic threats over interstate communications. That was a felony. And the guy's wife is an attorney. That's one case. I also filed a second case in 2019 where another person was habitually abusing access to Fulton County court records to harvest my phone number and email addresses and whatever they need to bring it back onto the Zello app, to propagate it over every single Zello chat room, to ask other gang cyberstalkers to make use of the information to further harass me. I was actually getting phone calls, I had to change the phone number because the phone number was in the court documents, and that made its way to Zello. It's just a big old mess. And Tim Fecht was basically like, we really don't like this guy at this point. Why not just pretend to investigate his cases and not let it be brought to any detective, and eventually he'll give up because we won't really do anything with his cases. We just won't tell him that we're not doing anything with his cases. And I dare ask at that point if a sergeant that's responsible for sending cases to detectives is making the decision of whether something should be investigated or not before even a detective can even evaluate the evidence. Is that obstruction of justice? If a sergeant, in this case Tim Fecht, is blocking my cases from being evaluated by detectives and even sitting down with me and seeing the new evidence that I wasn't even able to get a chance to get them when I first went and filed the incident reports in 2019, if a sergeant is blocking my ability to meet with a detective so that I can pursue charges on these additional assailants, he's blocking my ability to seek justice. Is that obstruction? Sounds to me and looks to me like it would be obstruction, which is also in of itself illegal. Usually you hear of suspects who aren't police officers engaging in obstruction. But like we've learned thus far in this video, when police officers are putting cameras in people's apartments and filming them having sex and going into bathrooms and taking pictures of another officer going to the bathroom. In this case, if a sergeant wants to block your ability to have your cases investigated properly and block your ability to have your evidence be looked at, that's also a crime, in my opinion. So that's what Tim Fecht did. Lieutenant Andrew Fondas, 2019 to 2021, when I realized Tim Fecht was doing nothing and won't do anything and just pretending to, I went above Tim Fecht's head and I complained to a higher level person above him, Lieutenant Andrew Fondas. I believed that Lieutenant Andrew Fondas would be able to kind of be like the interferer of this fake impression of mine that other officers on Dunwoody Police had, where he would be like, listen guys, like there's a lot of indication that this guy's getting attacked, especially since he's moved back to his mother's house. Why don't we look at his evidence? You think that happened? That didn't happen. No, Ronen's manipulating you, Fondas, said probably most likely Fecht. My opinion, can't prove it. It's just my opinion. I'm not saying it factually happened, but essentially Andrew Fondas became the good cop. Not any advocate for me whatsoever, because it was told to him, most likely in my opinion, that I was trying to manipulate him. It's not that Tim Fecht was trying to manipulate Andrew Fondas. No, that's not what was going on. It's not that Sergeant Tim Fecht was trying to manipulate other officers within the department to see me as a whack job. That wasn't what's going on. That wasn't manipulation. No, it was me attempting to manipulate Andrew Fondas, and I'm the troublemaker. Sure. So I'm going to read the section there. Ronen suffers increased attacks by Zello gang stalkers and realizes that Sergeant Tim Fecht is deliberately blocking cases from going to detectives. Ronen then complains about Sergeant Tim Fecht to Lieutenant Fondas. How do you think that worked out for me? Didn't work out well. Good old boy network, right? The additional person that's lastly mentioned here is Detective Tim Waldron. 2020. Why is he relevant in 2020? Because he arrested me. We're going to continue to unravel this in future videos. This is just an overview right now that led to the frame job. This isn't even part of the main frame job. Frame job did not start getting planned until 2021. Even though they falsely arrested me in 2020. Emphasis on falsely. Let me read the slide real quick, or that part. Mutual hatred for Ronen by Ronen's ex-partner, whom I met from Zello, plus Zello stalkers who were lying to Dunwoody cops about my conduct, and Sergeant Feck's own hatred for me, having already complained about him to his senior, being Lieutenant Fondas, developed this whole mishmash collusion where multiple people now, in fact, let me read the rest of it, leads to botched revenge investigation. Now, I'm not calling what happened in 2020 a frame job. It was a revenge investigation. There's a difference here. The frame job in 2021, that's still going on right now in 2023, the frame job attempt was spawned from my finding out that what was used to arrest me in 2020 was forged evidence. And when I found out, after being bonded out of jail and looking at the arrest warrant affidavit, when I found out that forged email evidence was used, only later on, when they found out, which I'm not going to cover just yet, because again, I'm not trying to overwhelm people with too much information. When they found out that I found out how to prove it in court, is when they said, okay, we got to do something far worse. And when I'm saying they, I'm not necessarily saying Tim Fecht. Tim Fecht didn't orchestrate a frame job on me. Neither did Andrew Fondas. While I know Tim Fecht was obstructing my cases, and Andrew Fondas was assisting in that obstruction by playing fake good cop to me, and also agreeing that none of my things should be fairly completely pursued after about 2020. Other people decided to design a frame job. Other senior officers let's continue. I was about to say something, but it's just like not the right time yet in this video, or in this portion of the information reveal. This is overwhelming, by the way, folks. This is overwhelming for one man to try to keep in one mind, in one brain. But, in fact, you know what? I will say this. I will say this right now without caring, because I'm no longer going to have my voice silenced while people are trying to frame me so that the truth never comes out. If anyone would like to know how easy it is to prove that my arrest in 2020, when I was accused of violating a restraining order that was ill-conceived in the first place, the restraining order intention itself had nothing to do with safety. It was all a big mirage. It had to do with blackmail. I was blackmailed, basically, essentially communicated that if I were to speak out in public about my ex-partner's own issues and own practices, if I spoke out in public, then the frame job would be coming from my ex-partner, because then she had power over me through the ill-conceived restraining order. Once the restraining order was over my head, if she wanted to frame me, if she wanted to join along in something like that to punish me, if she wanted to do anything to me, people in America have no idea how easy it is to get somebody arrested once you have a restraining order on them. This is kind of a sickening thing about our country, but I'm going to defer that to a much future video because I don't want to fall into too much commentary. Okay? It's very easy to prove that the evidence that was submitted to DeKalb County to get my arrest warrant in 2020 was forged. How do I know? It's in the arrest warrant affidavit. All a person needs to do is go read the multi-page arrest warrant affidavit, where Detective Tim Waldron basically explains the nature of the perceived violation. The nature of the perceived violation is my ex-partner called from New York. She wasn't even living in Georgia. The moment she got her restraining order, she dipped out of the whole state. She didn't want to tell that to the judge in the beginning. You know, people get restraining orders because they're legitimately worried for their safety. My ex-partner was not legitimately worried about her safety. She was already planning to leave the state. What did she think? That, like, I was going to, like, go 5 states to find... Like, give me a break. She knew what she was doing. She strategized it. The motive was ulterior until it led to other things that, again, not appropriate for this video to explain it, but it will be explained, that essentially... almost at the conclusion of the 1-year restraining order, she calls in what I like to joke now in hindsight as a mail order arrest. You know the term a mail order bride? She called up from New York and tried to request, almost like a McDonald's order, a mail order arrest of me, 5 states away, citing the restraining order. Well, when she contacted the Dunwoody Police, after all the times that they've ignored all of my cases, they welcomed her request with open arms, ready to do whatever it takes to collude with my ex to run a botched investigation, to teach me a lesson. After all the years that they haven't investigated squat, they haven't gone after any of the Zello cyberstalker assailants, I was supposed to become everybody's convenient scapegoat. The Dunwoody Police, the Zello gang stalkers, and my ex-partner. All creating a trilogy, a triangulation of their own around me. I'm supposed to play the role of the common denominator of everybody's problems involved in this. So it's great to scapegoat me because Dunwoody Police's pre-existing corruption led them to not being able to properly investigate anytime that I went after them with cases. Hey, here's my cases. Investigate my evidence. No, screw you. I'm going off on a tangent. It's very easy. All one needs to go do is go read the arrest warrant affidavit, where Detective Tim Waldron thought he would be smart by telling my ex-partner, listen, so you're saying that you're getting anonymous emails from Ronen, and the anonymous emails are coming from this service called Proton Mail, Swiss-based company that has private email, private this, private that, VPN, cloud service, you name it, they got it. They're a great company. Multiple people on Zello know about Proton Mail, by the way. But because of the nature of Proton Mail being an anonymous email service that doesn't leave any IP address traces in the email for anyone to even be able to know where the email was originating from, Tim Waldron, who was in receipt of these Proton Mail emails from my ex-partner saying that all of them are me and all of them are this or all that, and I'm violating, and she's afraid for her life, 5 states away from some emails. Right. Because they were untraceable, Tim Waldron said to my ex-partner, he said, listen, I have an idea. Go back to your old emails that you had, that you were good with Ronen when you guys were in good standings. You know, like a Gmail email, like an old Gmail, and send me an old email of his that can be proven came from him. And if the words of that old email match with the verbiage and words of any of these Proton Mail emails, well then Tim Waldron then can take the, what we would call, you know, like in a clinical study, we have something called the control. He was asking for a control email. He was asking for something that is proven to have come from me. And if the words from a legitimately verifiable email that comes from me has words that match with the wordings of the Proton Mail emails, then he can go to a judge and he can say, look, we're playing word match games from a legitimate email that did come at some point a very long time ago from Ronen to my ex-partner. And look at these other emails that she's saying she's getting in the middle of the restraining order period. Clearly, the words match from Ronen's old email to these Proton Mail things. And it worked. It worked. The judge bought it. The judge bought that pitch and signed off on my arrest warrant. But there's only one problem with all of that. Is when I got bonded out of jail, I examined the arrest warrant. And there is one word that Detective Tim Waldron wrote in the arrest warrant affidavit that stuck out like a sore thumb. When he was referencing the verbiage of the control email, the one that legitimately was supposed to be verifiable as having come from me from an old Gmail account, not from Proton, from Gmail. He wrote this one word in the arrest warrant affidavit as being one of the words that was a part of what's supposed to be the control email, the verifiable email that came from an old Gmail account of mine. And that word is, and anyone can see it in the arrest warrant affidavit, that word is derealization. The word is derealization, to derealize. Basically the reverse of realization. It's kind of ironic that my ex-partner chose to forge an email using a word that basically means to not know, to derealize. Because I did the exact opposite when I saw this arrest warrant affidavit. I didn't derealize, I realized that I never have ever in my entire life used the word derealization. And it took me a few months to realize what actually happened. What my ex-partner did when Tim Waldron from Georgia tells her in New York, hey, just forward me an old email, and if the words match the Proton stuff, then I can go to a judge and do X, Y, and Z. I can get the warrant. So what did my slick ex-partner do? She did indeed go to the one of few emails that we had exchanged. Because mind you, like, I'm not stupid. I remember also when me and my ex-partner were together, we barely ever emailed. How many people would say that they're in a relationship with someone and you send each other emails? No, you don't send each other emails. We texted each other. That's how you communicate. One-off times there might have been an email, one or two, maybe 3, 4 times, but that's it. So there's barely any control email to even look for when Tim Waldron came up with this novel idea on how to get the warrant. But I realized what she did. She indeed went to a legitimate old email of mine from an old Gmail account of mine, no longer even working. She hit the forward button and she changed the words. She came up with this entire verbiage. My ex-partner is an English major. She was an English major in college. She's a writer. She knows how to write. She wrote for her school newspaper. Okay? She's a professional writer. And boy, oh boy, did she professionally write a forgery pretending to be me. When she did extra credit after she hit the forward button on a legitimate email, she removed the original contents of what I wrote and wrote things on my behalf for me to match the stuff with the Proton Mail stuff. In that one instance, to try to get me arrested for literally nothing, or what she felt was something, for what she thought what she was doing was something like sticking it to me. In order for the warrant to appear as legitimate, by her switching out the words of the control email and writing new verbiage to match with the proton mail stuff, she committed identity theft, pretending to be me, felony. She also submitted falsified evidence, tampering with evidence, another felony. I think, depending on where it's at, sometimes felony, sometimes misdemeanor. I don't know. I don't even think it's a misdemeanor anywhere. And she lied to police, to Dunwoody Police, about the whole thing. Because at that point, what is the worth and the weight of her original complaint from New York to Dunwoody if her intention was a willingness to submit falsified evidence to try to make a warrant stick on my arrest? So I'm thinking maybe up to 3 charges, but definitely 2. Identity theft, impersonating me, and tampering with evidence. Now, what does that leave for Tim Waldron? Did he knowingly allow her? Or did he just play dumb and not know that he didn't submit a vetted piece of evidence? Either way, when it would have come in trial, it would have looked really stupid on the part of Tim Waldron and my ex-partner. She would have then immediately been opened to being charged with a crime. And Tim Waldron would then be investigated on whether he willingly submitted forged evidence to have me arrested. Obviously, he would have potentially risked losing his job. And obviously, this would all have led to a very, very expensive false arrest lawsuit. That when the members of the community, the citizens of Dunwoody, would have found this out, this would have been the last straw that broke the camel's back. After so many previous scandals that have nothing to do with me, after so many lawsuits that have nothing to do with me with previous officers, and the previous indications that people have already in the community of Dunwoody asked Chief Billy Grogan to step down because of all the corruption and all the scandals and all this other lawsuits that they have to fit the bill for. They knew by 2021 that I figured out that the evidence that they used to have me arrested, acting under the color of law, because they could have run a much better investigation. They could have even contacted me. They didn't do anything. They literally just let my ex-partner from New York send him whatever she wanted to, and they passed it off as vetted. What he should have done is he should have just actually had, if he was really like legit about the investigation, Tim Waldron, what he should have done is that he should have just simply asked my ex-partner to just walk her way into the lobby of her own New York Police Department and logged in to where the control email of mine allegedly is, so that a New York officer who is unbiased would be able to view that the electronic email that's about to be forwarded to Tim Waldron to Georgia from New York was not tampered with. There was no authenticator in New York that was used to make sure that before the send button is hit, that nothing was altered when the forward button was hit first to allow the email to be altered. Not only that, he could have even sent a subpoena to Google and said, hey, I need authentication that the words of this Gmail email is actually what's sitting on your servers, Google, because we're working on a case that's entirely dependent on the authenticity of what's written inside of an email. And it's a big deal because it's riding on a felony case. So once again, the track record of the Dunwoody Police is one where if the chief of police runs botched investigations on his senior lieutenant asking for nudes of junior officers, I mean, if the chief of police can run botched investigations, then surely so can the detectives who report to him. And the adding to insult to injury is how dare I find out about this? How dare I find out? How dare I find out that they falsely arrested me? You know what they need to do now that they figured out that they falsely arrested me? They know what they'll do. They'll just make a 10 times bigger case. Not only will they make a 10 times bigger case, but they'll lie even harder to the DeKalb system. They'll lie even harder to DeKalb judges. They'll lie even harder to the DA. They'll tell the DA, look, we got a bigger case on Ronen. Can we put the first case on the back burner? What they didn't tell the DA is that they're manipulating, deceiving the DA and the courts to give them more time for a frame job to work. And so the next slide here shows the crazy thing that I was entrapped into. This triangulation that could have only taken place if the more powerful point of this triangle was as corrupt as everybody else. The only way that this could have happened is if a corrupt police department was running the show. I had 3 points around me. And when I found out that I could prove that I was falsely arrested, I didn't have any more 3 points around me. But the Dunwoody Police was going to make sure that it becomes much more engulfing around me than just 3 points when they roped in, deceived, and lured more and more and more people into the charade that became the frame job. See everybody in the next video.